What's up everyone, Brenden here with another episode of Gaming Details. We're going to be taking a look at the Resident Evil games, which are some of my all-time favorites. This week's game was suggested by YouTube user Fred Capel. Now let's jump right into the video. Our first detail brings us to the Resident Evil 2 remake. With the original game's release being more than 20 years ago, it was definitely showing its age and time for a much needed upgrade. Tons of improvements were made, but what stands out the most of course are the graphics. And with those updated graphics came the ability to show off and display far greater detail in the visuals. For example, in the game, after Claire gives her jacket to Sherry, you'll see that her arms are a bit less dirty than the other areas like her face, chest, or neck, due to them not being covered by clothing. Continuing in the Resident Evil 2 remake, there's a moment where we see an ice cream machine that has written on it, "Herb ice cream, herbs heal you." I think this was a cool and clever way for the developers to hint towards the game's healing mechanic. It even has different flavors on it representing each of the colors of the herbs in the game. For our next detail, we're gonna head over to Resident Evil 4. For a game that came out 15 years ago, this one still does a pretty good job at holding up to today's standards. And usually when a game is able to do that, it means it was ahead of its own time. You don't have to play this game very long to see that the developers put a lot of time and thought into everything it offers. And one example of this is during the cutscene/QuickTime event, where Leon has a brief fight with Krauser. You'll notice that Leon gets cut across the face and starts to bleed as a fresh wound. And throughout the rest of the game, the cut remains on his face and even shows signs of healing towards the very end. If you've ever played Resident Evil 4, there's no doubt that you haven't forgotten the soothing tune you're met by upon entering a safe room. The song that's being played in these areas is called Serenity. I can't think of a better fitting name for a piece of music that makes you feel like you're finally safe from the danger that lurks within Raccoon City. But what you may not have noticed is that the song is actually just a lower pitched version of the song Beyond the Fog from Monster Hunter. For our fifth detail, we'll be loading up Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and taking a look at the enemies, specifically the Molded. Now, I don't know about you, but I remember the first time encountering one of these guys was one of the scariest moments I've ever had in gaming. One moment, I'm wandering through the nearly pitch black basement, and the next I'm walking straight into one of these nightmares. These things look like what would happen if a regenerator from Resident Evil 4 went through a meat grinder. Although they're humanoid-like figures, they aren't actually reanimated corpses. They do, however, feed on human bodies, which gives them the energy and biomatter to form themselves. And if you're unlucky enough to get this close to them, you can see what appears to be human eyeballs in their mouths. Continuing in Resident Evil 7, another enemy that you'll encounter in the game are Marguerite's man-eating insects. Although these things don't do much damage on their own, they're still annoying as hell when they come at you in swarms. But thankfully, they're not too hard to kill, especially if you have a flamethrower equipped. One thing you may not have noticed though, is that when the insects do swarm and attack you, your arms will get covered in small bumps from the bug bites. So make sure you bring some bug spray on your next playthrough. On to our seventh detail, we're going to be heading back to the Resident Evil 2 remake. There's an area in the game where a banner reading "Welcome Leon" can be seen hung from the ceiling. On a desk underneath the banner is an extra letter L. This is because in the original Resident Evil 2, there was a "Welcome Leon" sign that was misspelt with an extra L. There's no way to own your own mistake quite like giving it a remaster. For the next detail, we're going to be heading back quite a few years to the original Resident Evil 2. Back when it was released in 1998, it was very popular for horror games to have fixed camera angles. However, they've pretty much faded from the genre throughout the years. Something you might find interesting though, is that in sort of an attempt to break the fourth wall, the developers made it so that you can actually shoot the camera. On to the eighth detail, we're going back to Resident Evil 4. In the game, Leon is assigned to rescue Ashley from Raccoon City and bring her back to safety. Leon, of course, is carrying the weight of the load on this mission, but not without a little bit of moral support from Ashley. You'll notice that whenever Leon shoots an enemy off of a ledge, Ashley will give you a congratulatory fist pump. Way to go, Leon. For our final detail, we'll be continuing in Resident Evil 4. Now, I don't know about you all, but Ashley Graham was probably one of my first video game crushes.
Calm down, son. It's just a drawing, not the real thing.
I also may have been a bit too young to be playing this game my first time around, but my 8 or 9-year-old brain just couldn't help itself but to try and get a look at Ashley as she would climb the ladder or stand above you. It was then when I realized that the developers were already thinking what I was thinking. If you try to get a look up her skirt, she will cover herself up and call you a perv.
It's just a drawing.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode of Gaming Details. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can be notified as soon as our latest videos come out. If you have a suggestion for a future episode of Gaming Details, leave it in the comments below. Thank you all again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.